Greetings from Houston, Texas, and welcome to episode 19 of Virtual Festival 20x2020. I'm here at the beautiful Hobby Center for the Performing Arts in downtown Houston, where our Armenian Dreams concert was to take place this past spring. This program would have featured the world premiere of the 19th commission of our 20x2020 project, with Armenian duduk prodigy Arsen Petrosyan and Iranian-born percussion master Pejman Hadadi, joining us here in the Bayou City for this global collaboration. Like so many others, this concert was canceled due to COVID. We had no idea when it might be possible to reschedule this very elaborate and unique program and to safely bring our guests to Houston from afar. Instead of waiting for an unknown time, we reimagined the limits of what is possible now in the digital realm. Both Arsen and Pejman have filmed their contributions in their respective homes, Arsen in Yerevan, Armenia, and Pejman in Los Angeles. In fact, Arsen braved the ongoing violence in his country to bring us his stirring and soulful performance. Like a musical tapestry, these have been weaved together with our new Apollo studio performance, recorded just down the street at Wortham Theater Center. We wish to thank Arsen and Pejman for their supreme artistry, composer Eve Beglarian for her creative vision and singular compositional voice, and commission underwriter Pamela Alburn for her inspiring generosity. And last but not least, we are grateful for the 21st century digital talents of our audio engineer Ryan Edwards, videographer Ben Doyle, and Apollo's own Annabelle Dietrich Ramirez. The program continues with a behind-the-scenes conversation with composer and underwriter, followed by the digital world premiere of We Will Sing One Song. In the spirit of Apollo's unique multicultural mission, please enjoy this truly globally inspired presentation.
Welcome to number 19. Today we're talking about the 19th commission in the Apollo Chamber Players 20x2020 commissioning project. I'm joined by three of the members of the Apollo Chamber Players, also by composer Eve Beglarian and underwriter Pamela Alburn. Welcome, everybody. Matt Dietrich, where did this commission come from? How did it come about? We're getting towards the end of the project now, and we've covered a lot of geographical ground. Where are we for number 19?
So this was essentially the brainchild of a friend of ours and a patron that had been attending Apollo concerts for a number of years, Pamela Alburn. she had seen what we've been doing with the project, and by the 19th commission, I think had an idea of what we were looking for. She emailed me or called me up, I can't remember which one, and she told me the story of her Armenian heritage. Her grandparents were born in Armenia, and then immigrated to the United States, and she wanted to underwrite a piece to honor their heritage as well as of her late father. I did a little bit of research. There aren't too many Armenian composers that are living in the United States right now. However, I found information and the website of Eve Beglarian. She seemed like a really great fit from her musical style and her compositional aesthetic and just her personality. So I contacted her, and we kind of took things from there.
Well, Eve, welcome. Where are you in the world?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm in Vermont right now, rural Vermont, outside of the town of Brandon, in a little composing cabin, 10 by 12 composing cabin in the woods.
Is this your Thoreau cabin?
Yeah, or maybe my Mahler cabin, since it's a composing cabin.
Yeah.
So.
Right. And you and your family, etc., everybody is safe and well during the pandemic?
Thank you so much. Yes.
Yeah. You have named this piece, We Will Sing One Song. And I understand that there is a literary dimension to the title and the background to this piece.
Yes. So when Matt gave me this commission to write a piece for duduk and percussion and strings, thanks to Pamela, I started thinking about, what do I want to do with this instrumentation? And often when I'm casting about for what the piece ought to be, I'll read stuff or research in order to get, some kind of a sense of where I might want to go. And I had a book on my bookshelf probably my entire life. In fact, yes, it was my grandmother's copy of this book, actually, which is by William Saroyan, who was an emigre Armenian writer. Actually, he may have been born in this country. He may be like me and like you, Pamela, born in America, but of Armenian heritage. And the novel is called The Human Comedy, and it's written during the Second World War. It's an America of immigrants where all immigrants are valued and welcomed. And I recommend highly reading it now in the current world we're living in, because it's kind of profound to see what that vision of democratic America was in 1943 and how under siege it is. I'll just put it that way. At any rate, in this novel, there's a little boy who's like 4 years old, and he sees a train going by, and he's waving at the train, and he waves and waves, and nobody waves back. And he's sort of heartbroken until at the very end of the train, there's a guy waving back at him, and he is a black man, and he's singing My Old Kentucky Home. A line of which, of course, is, we will sing one song, right? I mean, that's a phrase. And so the boy, it's described in the novel that the boy remembers the man waving to him while singing this song for the rest of his life. And that absolutely sort of aligned what the piece should be for me, because in a certain way, the black man's return to his old Kentucky home would be roughly equivalent to me going to Van, which is a town in eastern Turkey, which is where my grandparents lived and had to leave in 1915. So it's this song of longing, My Old Kentucky Home, is also a song about returning to a place that is fraught and difficult for the person and yet is beloved. And my father spoke of Van with love and affection, even though this was a place he had never seen himself, because his mother went to Yerevan in 1915. His father went to Tbilisi in 1915. How the two met and married and ended up creating my father is not something I know the answer to. I don't know how that happened. But my father was born in Tbilisi and then traveled to Iran. His parents died in Iran, and he eventually ended up in the United States in 1947. So
it's a beautiful story.
Wow.
It is.
Yeah.
Let's do a quick geography lesson here. Yerevan is the capital of Armenia. Tbilisi is the capital of Georgia.
yes.
It's a part of the world where the boundaries have been, or maybe still are, often contested.
Yes, very much so. And in fact, there's the complexity of what's going on in Azerbaijan, where there's a part of Azerbaijan that's claimed by Armenia, and it is an autonomous territory held by the Armenians in the middle of Azerbaijan, which is a mess and a source of tremendous anguish and very difficult to resolve.
I think this is why the music, we're talking about the boundaries, how the boundaries change, but the music doesn't. I mean, the music comes from the people, and people move and people relocate, but they bring their music with them. And I think that's why this particular region has such a rich culture and history of folk music and traditional music.
So, Eve, you mentioned My Old Kentucky Home, which I believe is a Stephen Foster song.
Yes.
Do you reference that in your music, in the composition?
Yes. In a certain way, the whole piece is built out of an abstraction of My Old Kentucky Home. And by the end of the piece, Arsen, the duduk player, will be playing, in a sense, an Armenian version of My Old Kentucky Home. So yes, it's embedded in the piece.
Now, the piece is for string quartet, duduk, and percussion. What is a duduk?
The duduk is a double reed instrument made of apricot wood. So it's sort of like an oboe, but it has a more woody, warm quality than a contemporary modern oboe. It's a traditional instrument. It's the traditional instrument of Armenia, for sure. Yes.
And this was one of the things that when Pamela came to me with the idea of a commission, she mentioned a couple of duduk players that she found very inspiring and beautiful. So I thought that the duduk had to be a part of this commission.
Well, Pamela, you have, as we've mentioned, you have Armenian heritage. How far back does that Armenian heritage go? You were born and raised in the US, I believe.
Yes, and my grandparents came over, and as much of the story of people that are part of a diaspora, you don't know. So the most that I know is from what I've been able to gather from 23andMe, beyond my parents.
Oh wow!
What they told me. So my DNA says that I have heritage that comes from Iran, from Armenia, and from Turkey.
This is the Caucasus region of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned also, or Matt mentioned, that you're very familiar with the duduk and the music played by the duduk. What is it that particularly attracts you to this instrument?
Have you heard of duduk?
Yes, I have.
It sound. I think the best I've heard was someone described it to me as the lament of a nation. It's just completely unique. It's this deep, melodious, incredible sound.
Let's ask the musicians about playing with a dudukist. I don't know if that's the correct word for a person that plays a duduk. This is an instrument I imagine that Apollo has not played with before.
We haven't, and unfortunately, because our concert was canceled this past March because of the stay-at-home orders and the pandemic, we have yet to meet our duduk player, who's named Arsen Petrosyan. He lives in Yerevan, Armenia, and he was, this was to be his first concert here in Houston, in the Bayou City. But to answer your question, no, we have not, worked with a duduk player as of yet. That's one of the reasons why we're excited about this piece.
Well, Eve, what is the interplay between the duduk and the string quartet?
Traditional duduk music very often involves two duduk players, one of whom plays a drum and the other of whom plays the melody against the drum. So at the beginning of the piece, the string players, the string quartet, basically creates a sort of fancy drone, if you want to think of it that way, right? So it references that traditional relationship between figure and ground, if you will.
Right.
Then there's a sort of center section which does something that is not traditional at all, which in working with Arsen, that required the most work together to push what I'm asking him to do on the duduk in a direction that is not normally what you think of as duduk music. Okay. And in a certain way, it's an interesting and exciting thing to hear the duduk do something that is not particularly idiomatic to the duduk, and yet is stretching the duduk. And then the final section where you get the Armenian version, the dudukified version of My Old Kentucky Home, is sort of going in the reverse direction, right? Where all the things that the duduk does naturally, that the duduk player does with his whole heart every day, and that his expertise, which is, for me, it's been really fascinating to work with Arsen. And I look forward, I hope that even as you work distance, you string players, there is a gift here in listening to how Arsen thinks about pitch bends, right? About glissandos. His sensitivity to the nuance of speed and rate of change, right? The physics of how you get from one note to another is so beyond sophisticated.
And for for our viewers out there, when we're talking about bending pitches, it's just going from one note to another. And and what you're saying is there's a lot of nuance in, the departure and then arrival between two different notes. And normally for string players, you just go, okay, you just slide up. But you're saying there's a lot, there's much deeper components there. Yeah.
It's more like melismatic singing. And it's like the difference between, Aretha and, the person at the local church.
Well, I wonder if Annabella or Matthew, are there elements in this piece that are not, that are perhaps Armenian that you haven't ordinarily seen?
I don't know if there's anything that's that we haven't seen before. I love the description of the nuance to the glissandos, because I think that's something that we can only sort of feel out in collaboration with Arsen. And so, like some of our other projects in the past, when you get someone who has such a wealth of experience in the music that they're playing and familiar with and backgrounded in. They have so much to offer you.
Well, Annabelle, I think after 19 commissions, each of the members of the chamber players should be able to master anything, because you have mastered compositions from all over the place.
That's right. And you know, I was just thinking earlier this morning about how different each one of them is, and it's really amazing. And it took me back to just thinking about, you know, how we learn to play all this Western music by you know, the great composers. And for some reason I had this memory back to college and listening to exams where they test you and see if you can guess which composer wrote this composition just by listening to an excerpt, right? And then I'm thinking about 20 by 2020 and thinking, I don't think any of these composers sound like anybody else. You know, maybe here and there a little bit. You know, there's a lot of like the Bartok and maybe I don't know, like some of the influences, but mostly everybody has their own voice that is very, very unique. And it's really amazing when we get a new piece to open the score and just see how even the music notation just looks different, and we just never know what we're gonna get. But it's been so fantastic, and I feel the same way with Eve's music, because you know, same thing happened to me. I you know, look at the first page and I'm like, what is this gonna sound like? Because it's not that I've never seen you know, the notes that are on the page or the notation, but the way that it looks and the way that it's kind of like this strata in between the glissandi in the instruments. It's something that we haven't done in this project before. So, you know, something new.
Great.
And the architecture of the pieces is definitely different than our other commissions too.
Mm-hmm.
There's not necessarily, you know, a point where there's a climax in the piece that you would, you know, normally find in like a Beethoven or Brahms. But it's very groovy. The rhythm's groovy, and we can't forget the addition of Pejman Hadadi, our wonderful percussion player that has some interesting improvisations and really kind of holds the piece together with his rhythmic glue.
Pejman, I when we were discussing a percussionist for this project, I recommended Pejman.
Yes.
Who is not Armenian, he's Persian. And part of that is because my father grew up in Tehran. I'm really interested, Pamela, to hear that you have also Iranian roots alongside your Armenian and your Turkish roots. Because of course there's a very large community of Armenians in Iran. But I think for me, part of the urge in making sure to have a performer from a different tradition is in recognizing that we are all one, and that the best way for us to recognize that is by coming together and making work together, making art together.
Pamela, being involved in this process, underwriting this commission, and interacting with obviously Eve and the Apollo Chamber players, what does this mean to you?
I think it's been quite a marvelous experience, but it's been totally unexpected, because at every turn, because of COVID, we've been replanning and rethinking. But I love this idea of one song, because not so much for the same reasons, but the Armenians are a huge diaspora all over the world. I know that my grandmother spent some time in France, and I know that there's a huge, and I've been there to see some of her relatives that live in Paris and also on the coast. And so we're all over the world. I mean, we're truly everywhere. So that's
you mentioned France. My first year teaching in France, I worked with a woman who taught, I was teaching English in the middle school. She taught French, and she was of Armenian heritage, Mademoiselle Boyadjian. And, you know, she was obviously very proud of her Armenian heritage, and it was a fascinating mixture there, the Armenian and the French. What this does show us is that in this time, a time of uncertainty, that we do really all sing one song. And that can be taken on so many levels. The allegory is wide and deep, and we look forward to hearing We Will Sing One Song. Eve Beglarian, thank you very much for your creativity. Thank you to Pamela for your generosity, and thank you to the members of the Apollo Chamber Players. We look forward to the 20 by 2020 number 19. Thank you all very much.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.